Welcome. Today we're diving deep into the Anni Dewani case. It's a story that really makes you ask, when that perfect public image starts to crack, how far will someone go to stop the world from seeing inside? It's just a tragic and honestly deeply confusing mystery. A newlywed bride, murdered on what should have been her dream honeymoon in Cape Town. We've gathered the police reports, court transcripts, personal accounts, everything surrounding her murder back in 2010. Our goal here is to really distill what we know about this case. We're going to focus on the contradictions, the unreliable evidence, and this one really chilling detail that never quite added up.
Yeah, and it's important for you to grasp that this isn't so much a straightforward whodunit. It's more about the why and the how it was done. We know who got convicted in the end, but the question of who was really behind it, the mastermind, that rests entirely on whether you believe known criminals. We have to look beyond the headlines, examine all those little pieces of circumstantial evidence that either seem to support the murder for hire idea or, completely failed to.
Okay, let's start with the couple at the center of it all. Anni Hindocha, born in 82, she was a bright, successful Swedish-Indian engineer working over in Stockholm. By all accounts, just vibrant, lively, really, really close to her family.
And her fiancé, who became her husband, was Relive the Anni Dewani, born 79, a wealthy, pretty high-profile British businessman from London. He ran a nursing home business. He sort of represented status, wealth, and this absolutely perfect public image. They met in London 2009, I think, had a long-distance thing for a while before Anni moved to be with him. And it all culminated in this huge, lavish Indian wedding in Mumbai. Apparently took 3 months just to plan it all.
And their honeymoon choice, South Africa. They did about 4 days in Kruger National Park first, and then flew to the final stop, Cape Town. This was November 2010.
Right, and here's where we need to pause and add some context. Cape Town is stunning, a major tourist spot, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's also globally known for high rates of violent crime, robberies, muggings. It's a serious issue. Tourists are always warned to be extremely cautious there. Now, Shrine chose this destination, and instead of just using, say, hotel transport, they hired a local taxi driver, Zola Tongo, seemingly just because he seemed friendly, offered good prices.
And Tongo pretty quickly became their sort of private driver for the trip. Okay, now here's where the first, let's say, major point of interest comes up. On the day they arrived, Shrine insisted Anni check into their hotel, the very luxurious Cape Grace Hotel, by herself. Shrine stayed back in the taxi with Tongo for about 9 minutes. Shrine's official reason later, they were just discussing sightseeing plans.
9 minutes. Alone with the driver, right after arriving in a foreign country, supposedly just planning trips. It feels off.
Yeah.
It's, too long for just a quick chat about fares or something, but also a very specific amount of time to remember later. Especially when the prosecution basically hung their entire case on that window being the moment the murder was arranged.
The next couple of days seemed, normal on the surface. November 13th, there are photos of them sightseeing. They had a barbecue, dinner, out in the Gugulethu township. They look happy in the pictures. But around 10 p.m. that night, as they were driving back to the hotel, Tongo took a route. He later called it a shortcut, but it quickly turned terrifying. He pulled onto a road in a township, and bam, the car was ambushed. 2 men, we later learned their names, were Izoli Melange and Minziwa Madona Kwabe. They boarded the vehicle. They immediately started robbing them. Took cash, Shrine's watch, his wallet, phone.
But look at the sequence of who was let go. First, Congo, the driver, he's ordered out of the car almost right away. Then Shrine. He's held for maybe 20 minutes, and then he gets forced out onto the side of the road. A local resident found him later, apparently very distressed, crying, saying his wife in the car had been hijacked. But Anni was driven away by the 2 attackers.
And the question pops up immediately. Why let the driver go, then let the wealthy tourist husband go, but keep the wife? That separation of the victims, it's just highly unusual for a standard carjacking or robbery scenario. The truly horrific discovery was made the next morning, November 14th. Anni's body was found. She was in the back seat of their abandoned taxi, the VW Charan, in a place called Lingulethu West. She'd been murdered.
The autopsy showed clear signs of a struggle. She had multiple bruises. The fatal wound itself was a single gunshot. It actually passed through her left hand first, suggesting she'd raised it, defensively before it entered her neck and hit her spinal cord. It was an execution, essentially.
Initially, it looked like maybe a robbery that went terribly wrong. Police confirmed her watch was gone, a platinum and diamond bracelet too, her BlackBerry phone, worth about $90,000 altogether, they estimated. But here is the absolute central mystery, the thing that just flips this whole case on its head.
Her most valuable items, by far, her expensive diamond engagement ring and her wedding band, they were found inside the car. left behind.
Right. If this was purely about greed, a simple robbery, why on earth would you leave the most expensive, easily pawnable items? It's the anomaly, the thing you just can't ignore.
Exactly. You've got two main possibilities here, right? One, it's a random violent robbery. If so, leaving the rings makes zero sense. Those are prime targets. Hypothesis two, this was actually a staged contract killing designed to look like a robbery. In that case, the rings are irrelevant to the hitmen. Their job isn't theft. It's to eliminate Annie and make the scene look plausible. So the fact the rings were left behind, that fits the contract killing theory almost perfectly.
And that disturbing detail really pushed the investigation forward. Police managed to track the attackers pretty quickly using fingerprints left in the car. That led them straight to Melenge and Quawab, and once they were under investigation, the whole story it imploded. The suspects, including Zolotongo, the taxi driver, they completely changed their tune. They claimed the robbery was just a cover.
Tongo confessed. He said that those 9 minutes back at the hotel weren't about sightseeing at all. That was the exact moment Shrine hired him to find hitmen. To stage the robbery, yes, but crucially to make sure Annie was killed in the process. Shrine allegedly offered R200,000, about 20,000 US back then for the whole job. Tongo then laid out the chain. He was the driver and arranger. He recruited a guy named Monde Mbulompo, a hotel receptionist, as an intermediary, and Mbulompo then hired Melenge and Quawab, the two gunmen, to actually carry it out.
Tongo also claimed Shreen paid half the money up front. There was CCTV footage showing Shreen carrying a bag into a room where Tongo was waiting. Tongo said that bag held the first payment. Shreen, of course, absolutely denied this. He insisted the money was just payment for Tongo's driving services, nothing more sinister.
So, with this new contract killing theory on the table, the police started digging into the couple's life, looking for a motive behind the perfect marriage. And they found, well, significant cracks. Annie's own sister revealed that Annie was actually deeply unhappy. She felt Shreen was controlling, kind of an obsessive perfectionist.
And Annie's text messages, they paint such a painful picture. A woman feeling trapped. Back in September 2010, just before the wedding, she told her sister they'd fought violently. She said she didn't want to marry him. A few days after that text, she wrote that she actually hated him.
It's really hard to square that level of distress, wanting out, even during the massive wedding in Mumbai, with then going ahead with the honeymoon. It strongly suggests that maintaining the public image, maybe pressure from family or the community, was incredibly important, certainly to Shreen. It looks like Annie was desperately trying to make it work, though. She texted her sister again on November 10th during the honeymoon, saying she was trying hard, but not happy.
Then came what the prosecution presented as the key motive, centered on Shreen's private life. A German male escort named Leopold Lesser came forward. Lesser claimed Shreen had been a client. He testified that Shreen was struggling with his sexuality and felt immense pressure to marry Annie to keep up appearances, his social standing. Lesser said Shreen basically didn't know how to get out of the engagement gracefully.
And this gave the prosecution a powerful narrative, didn't it? That Annie became a casualty of Shreen's need to maintain this perfect facade. That he needed to escape a marriage he couldn't handle, but without the social fallout of divorce or, crucially, having his secret life exposed.
Shreen denied everything, every single allegation. His defense argued it was completely implausible. Why would a successful international businessman try to hire hitmen in a foreign country where he knew absolutely no one, relying on some random taxi driver he just met? The whole trial essentially boiled down to this. Shreen's flat denial versus the testimony of the four accomplices, all pointing the finger at him as the mastermind.
And then in 2014, after months of really harrowing testimony for everyone involved, the court delivered a verdict that stunned many. Shreen Dewani was acquitted. All charges dropped.
Wow. That must have been absolutely devastating for Annie's family. But you need to understand the judge's reasoning there. Why? Why, with four witnesses saying he did it, was he let go?
Well, the judge ruled that the evidence provided by those four key state witnesses, the driver Tongo, the go-between Mbulompo, and the two gunmen Melenge and Quawab, was, and I quote, hopelessly inconsistent and completely unreliable. You have to consider the source, right? These were four men already convicted or facing long sentences for their part in the crime. Their stories about meeting times, how payments were made, who did exactly what. They apparently changed and contradicted each other frequently. The judge essentially concluded that it was highly likely they'd colluded, perhaps fabricating the story about the rich tourist orchestrating it all, partly to minimize their own roles and shift the blame. So the idea of conducting Shrine based solely on the word of these unreliable witnesses, especially when the other evidence like CCTV footage and phone logs was considered circumstantial and didn't directly prove he paid for a murder, It just didn't meet that very high standard of proof beyond a reasonable doubt needed in a murder trial.
But the four men who admitted their roles did face consequences for the robbery and murder itself, right?
Oh, absolutely. Tongo, the driver, he got 18 years. Kwabe, one of the shooters, received 25 years. Malenge, the other shooter, got a life sentence, although he actually died in prison later that same year, 2014. Monday Mbulampo, the alleged intermediary, was acquitted due to lack of direct proof of his involvement in the planning.
So the acquittal left Annie's family in this terrible position, not only grieving Annie, but the trial itself forced all these secrets about Shran's life, his sexuality, their unhappy marriage out into the open. It must have just compounded their pain enormously.
Exactly. Annie's uncle even said publicly sometime later that while the family had to accept the court's decision, the legal acquittal, they felt Shrin owed them an apology. Not necessarily for the murder, but for all the dishonesty, the secrets that made the whole investigation and the trial such a nightmare for them. Shrin, for his part, has since publicly moved on. He later entered into a relationship with a man.
So where does that leave us? We're basically left staring at two starkly different stories. Was this a cold, calculated contract killing planned by a desperate husband trying to protect his perfect life at any cost? Or were these four convicted men just violent criminals who carried out a brutal robbery and murder and then cleverly concocted a story about the wealthy tourist ordering the hit, maybe to get better deals from the prosecution, less jail time?
The court decided the first scenario couldn't be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. But the fundamental tragedy doesn't change. Annie was murdered on her honeymoon. And, we mentioned it earlier, but I keep coming back to it. That single, most provocative, most chilling detail that still hangs over this entire case. Why were those incredibly valuable wedding and engagement rings left behind in the car? That detail still doesn't sit right, whichever narrative you lean towards. Why leave the diamonds?
It's a question that lingers. We really invite you, listening to this, to think about all the evidence we've discussed, from those crucial 9 minutes in the taxi right at the start, to the inconsistencies in the testimonies, and especially those abandoned rings. What do you think really happened on that terrible night in Cape Town? Thank you for joining us as we've tried to distill the knowledge surrounding the tragic and incredibly complex Anni Dewani case. We hope this deep dive gave you some clarity, or at least a fuller picture of the key facts and lingering questions. For more stories like this, please remember to press like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Horror Doc. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye.